Today, we'll be making this particular looping animation of green glowing crystals. Of course, this particular project was originally meant to be a single image that I was creating for a completely different project. However, that was using cycles, and I thought, why not record that process as well and put it up over here? And then later on, I created this loop using Eevee. These are the images that I wanted to make using cycles. This is the denoised image, and this is the noisy image. With 4,000 samples, it took almost 3.5 hours to render. However, that's what we'll initially create, and then we'll go about making the animation loop in Eevee. Sadly, while creating this, my laptop could not screen record as well as use cycles using the CPU at the same time, which caused it to crash. Not crash, it's just that the recording stopped and I didn't even know that the recording wasn't happening. So there's a lot of portions of this particular video that's just missing. It's almost about 20 minutes of work that's missing, but it's mostly just creative freedom of me trying out things that work and don't work, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Yet again, if you guys want me to make a step-by-step tutorial, comment it down and I will make a complete step-by-step tutorial of creating this. Here I was initially just modeling the crystal. It's a mixture of techniques that I had seen over the years. I saw somebody create a crystal like this and another tutorial somewhere that used Boolean tools. I didn't want to use the Boolean tools add-on, so I manually used the Boolean modifier in each step to just create a few scratches into the crystal just to make it look a little more interesting. So this is me just trying out different positions to get a few cracks into the crystal, the basic crystal shape, and then it's just about the material and duplicating this all around to create the final look. Honestly speaking, I'm not sure how useful this particular video will be in this section at least, because again, most of the creative process has been deleted and these videos are made so that somebody gets an idea of how long it takes to, figure out what looks good, what doesn't, the mistakes and all of those. And since most of that is missing, I'm not quite sure how useful this is. However, later on in the video, when we go into the looping part, that was made completely in Eevee and my laptop could handle it with ease. So there you can clearly see how I created the particles, and there's a few techniques over there of how to create the particles in a looping manner, which I think might be useful to some of you who are watching. So a few things that is actually good to know, hopefully if you're actually watching this, tips that make a lot of sense, is that firstly, I used a triangulate modifier because when I use this Boolean modifier to cut into the faces, it's always better to have a triangulate after that so that you don't have too many n-gons, because when you rendering out n-gons is far harder than just rendering out triangles or quads. And generally for gaming and things, GPUs work with quads the easiest, so it's best to keep them as quads. However, it's in this sort of a situation, it's fine, so I've kept them as triangles after the triangulate. And then as I implemented the triangulate, and also there was the subdivision surface modifier, there was areas that were causing problems. So that's why I had to slide the edges, the vertices into place so that they just don't cause any issues. So here already you can see the moment I switched into rendered view, it just stopped recording and the screen froze. I tried removing as much of these as I could notice the first time around when I was just scrubbing through to make sure that the video came in. So yeah, it's just different things that were going on and me trying out the material for this. So the material isn't much. In this case I've just switched to EV. I've switched on your ambient occlusion. I've switched on screen space refractions and reflections in both the render settings as well as the material. I've set the material itself to alpha blend. Now inside the material I wanted something to glow, so that's why I created this particular object inside. It's just an icosphere that's been elongated, and I wanted the edges of that to glow, and I wanted the edges to glow very brightly. So that's why I want to use this Fresnel technique using the layer weight the layer weight node. However, for some reason I wasn't getting the exact type of outer glow that I wanted. That could be because it was inside the crystal. However, I knew that I was going to use cycles at the end, so I didn't spend too much of time on it. However, yeah, so again, as soon as I went to cycles, it's just pretty much crashing and most of the things aren't getting recorded. But once I was happy with a single crystal, I just joined the two meshes, the icosphere and the crystal, which is just a cylinder, and then I just duplicated it around to make it look like multiple crystals growing, just generally how crystals are depicted in these types of abstract or sci-fi environments. And then yeah, I just copy pasted them all around, just duplicating the entire set and just rotating them both around the z-axis, around different axes, and just placement and rotation. That is about all there was that happened in this situation. Of course there was the placement of the camera, but I was just trying to see whether or not I can get a little bit of it filled up. Again, this was for a separate project that I had in mind, so it needed to be in a specific layout, and the colors as well, the color of the background had to be exact. So that is why all of this happened. But yeah, that is about it for this particular section, and I guess we'll probably come back right after we go into the EV modeling. This particular thing itself in cycles for rendering took I also use some compositing. That's something many new Blender users aren't aware of, but I used it to add in a type of bloom. Because cycles does not have blooms, I had to add in a glare node in between the output and the rendered image to help give it that sort of a bloom effect, which isn't there in cycles. So once I did that, it took about 3.5 hours to render. I rendered it at 4098 samples. The reason I did that was because I honestly thought that would be enough to remove all of the noise, but it wasn't. I definitely required a little bit more. However, this is the denoised image, and this is the noisy image. You can see that there is a little bit of noise, but I still prefer the noisy image because denoising generally removes a lot of details, and you can tell that it's been denoised. Here's my EV portion where I created the animation. So again, I think a little bit of it did get cut off, but I just added in an empty, parented the camera to the empty, and looped the empty one entire round. It's the same thing that I've been using in all of my previous videos. Once I did that, I wanted the reflections to come out a bit better rather than just having screen space reflection type of reflections. So I tried using the reflection map. However, the reflection plane wasn't giving me any bit of a difference. I couldn't exactly tell why. I'm guessing now that it was simply because my base material was not reflective enough, so it wasn't really acting like a mirror. I should have tried that out, but I saw that there was some form of reflection coming, though that was because of the screen space reflections that was switched on. I just decided to roll with it. Then I wanted to create the particle system. Initially I wasn't seeing any particles, so I just started emitting the crystal object itself, and I realized it's because of gravity, it's going underneath the plane, and then increased all of the randomnesses everywhere to get it to look more organic, to make it look more random. And then once I had it coming out in a way that I enjoyed or liked, I was thinking I would just have the glowing material inside that I'd use as the object, the icospheres. However, I joined the two meshes, so it's one single mesh. So I just created a new sphere that I was going to use as the object for the particle system. So once I had that working, the problem was that it was supposed to be a looping animation. And when you have particle systems, obviously they start in your first frame and they just end. So a neat technique of making particle systems also looping is having two particle systems with the exact same settings, but having one start from 150 frames, or like basically half the frames before the animation starts. So that's why the starting frame would become minus 150, and having it go end midway through the animation, and then have another particle system that starts midway through the animation and ends all the way 150 frames after the animation, which is again half the length of the animation after the animation ends. So once you do that, it perfectly loops. Now I wanted to see the perfect looping mechanism happen the same way how I generally do it. Frame number 301, which is one frame after the last frame, and the first frame should look exactly the same. However, for some reason it wasn't looking exactly the same, but because it's like one single frame that's probably getting skipped, could be due to my selection of 150, probably should have been 151 or something like that. Have to do the math, but it was looking good enough. It would be like it's skipping one frame at most, so it's really not noticeable. As you could see, I looped the video at least thrice at the beginning, and I will loop it again at the end. So you can't tell that it is looping. So it looks like a seamless loop. You can't tell the seam. So that's why I thought it was all right. And then once I was happy with the way it looked, I also tested out the area lights, which I had to use for cycles. For EV, I just thought it would look better. But the area lights was lighting up the ground as well, which wasn't looking good. So I decided to just remove the area lights, or just have them on, but at a low enough strength that they really didn't make a difference. I don't know why I kept them, but yeah, I kept them, and then I was happy. I feel like this particular video I'm just ranting a lot more than usual. It's okay. Nobody's gonna be watching these videos anyway. Or at least if you actually stay up to this point, I mean, congrats. I don't think I would watch this video till this point. So yeah, if you are actually watching, then you probably would want a tutorial, I think. Maybe, I don't know. Let me know and I'll do it. But let's see. So then, yeah, changed it to AVI JPEG, and the last thing that to do was just have a test render of a single frame. Once I was happy with it, it was just rendering the entire animation to create the following. No, before that I also had to just place the camera a bit. The test render showed that a bit of the last crystal was coming out of frame, so I didn't want that. I wanted all the crystals to be in frame at all points of time. So once I was happy with that, render the animation to create this. Seamless and looping, glowing crystals using Eevee, because if I was to render this using cycles, it would take me forever. So yeah, make sure you check out this particular video. I ran much lesser, trust me. And of course, subscribe for more, comment down what you'd like to see, and we'll definitely be making many more tutorials and videos just like this.